Will Brock Glenn and Florida State be able to throw the football consistently against a good Duke defense?
You are Locked On Seminoles, your daily podcast on the Florida State Seminoles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into Locked On Seminoles. I am your host, Brian Smith. Thank you for making this your first listen each and every day. Truly appreciate you stopping in to talk some Noles football with me. Today's show is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off of your first purchase. Today is the beginning, as far as I'm concerned, for prep for Duke because it is a Friday game. They will play Friday night. I want to say that about 20 more times just to remind people your schedule, if you're going to watch the Noles, is going to be a little different. It will be in Durham. It'll be a televised game. I'm sure that there won't be many Florida State fans making the trip all the way up there to the Tri-City area. But for those of you to do, good for you. Went up there last year. It's a pretty neat place to be. I will tell you this right off the bat. When I first went in to start looking at the stats, I had some ideas on what Florida State was going to be facing with Duke, and I knew they had a pretty solid defense. I did not, however, think it was going to be this good. So from this point forward, if you take nothing else from this podcast, note the following. Florida State is up against it, against Duke's defense. And you're probably like, oh, come on. I am not kidding. The numbers I'm about to give, back it up. Florida State is going against a team that, quite honestly, matches up extremely well against Florida State's front. And what they do is probably Florida State's biggest problem. So strength against weakness kind of deal. So I'm curious to see what adjustments Florida State's coaches make, and maybe they can change some minds based on this past weekend, not this weekend, but the last one, everybody being mad, including myself, and calling for coaches to go bye-bye, and then that culminating in Tuesday night's live show as well. But anyway, back to the point. Florida State is going up against a really good defense, and I'm just going to jump into the numbers here. They do not lie. All right, off the top, because I want to focus on the past game. I'm going to give everything, but this is the most important number of the entire show. It's impressive. 157.7 yards per game. That's 10th in the nation. That's what the Blue Devils give up per game through the air. Really, really good at not giving up a lot of yards after catch. They tackle well. They rally to the football. They've got a linebacker who's one of the best in the nation that kind of gets everybody lined up. And they've got a couple really good defensive linemen I'll talk about here in a little bit too, in one corner that I'm pretty curious to see. I'm going to have to go back and watch some film of him. Run defense. This is where you can typically get a team like Duke, and this is no different. The best teams in college football, what do? They recruit defensive linemen at an elite level. Do we really think Duke, honestly, is going out and getting the same kids that Florida State, Georgia, Miami, even North Carolina does? No, they do not. That does not mean they are not coached up pretty well with what they have. And again, I'll go over some players a little bit, but they're giving up 151.7. It's not terrible for the yards they give up on the ground, but it is 59th in the country. They are susceptible to big plays. Again, I'll go over some of that in a little bit. They are a feast or famine defense. Again, I'll go over that too. Like, we're coming after you, come hell, come high water. That is Duke's MO, and it's impressive how they do it, even though the risk is pretty high. 309.3 yards per game is what they give up in total on defense. That's 25th in the nation, so got to give credit to that staff. Scoring 17.5, that's 23rd in the nation. Pretty darn impressive. Here's the number above all else that shocked me because this is, again, you've just got a staff that just left. Mike Elko goes to A&M. You would think with all the seniors they had last year that they would be kind of in trouble. RJ Owen goes to Notre Dame, etc. Not so much. 6 games, 58 tackles for loss. For teams that have played 6 games, Duke is number 1 in the nation in tackles for loss. Number 1. So there's another team played 7 that's got more, but again, they've only played 6. Florida State is very susceptible to giving up big plays in its own backfield. This is a concern, and that's why the pass defense is so good. They get teams in a bad situation on first downs when they run the football, and then they can pin their ears back, bring multiple layers of blitzes, stunts, etc., and they really confuse quarterbacks. Sacks, very similar. They have 18. That is 15th in the nation. Turnovers. They've got 5 fumble recoveries, 4 interceptions. That's 43rd in the nation. Honestly, I'm a little bit surprised that Duke is not higher with that number, when you get that much pressure with all the tackles for loss, quarterbacks tend to throw it up and it goes to the wrong team. So Duke hasn't capitalized on that quite as much as I thought they would, but it's still not bad either. This is the one that is a little surprising as well. Speaking of not capitalizing, when you get pressure, you shouldn't give up near as much down the field in terms of the passing yards on big plays. There's a little caveat to this if you hit screens, but passing plays of 20 or more yards, Duke has given up 19. That's 67th in the nation. Why? I'm surprised. They tackle pretty well from what I've seen. I've only watched some film. I haven't watched a whole bunch of them live this year. I'm going to go watch some more after I get done with this podcast, but I wonder what the deal is with that. I've talked about Florida State needing Benson, even guys like Cam Davis out of the backfield. Obviously, Tofioli making more guys miss because their blocking is bad. That's the option. Either you make guys miss or you're not going to get a lot of yardage right now until otherwise proven. So that's something to look at. Running game, 20-yard runs or more. They've given up 8. That's 65th in the nation. Again, a little surprising. They're not super deep as a general rule, and this team certainly isn't either. But I'm surprised that it's that low. They've given up that many runs that are big. They did play some decent teams already. Got some mobile quarterbacks, Haynes King, etc. But still, I'm surprised by that. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. You just talk about opponents passing. Teams have thrown the football with different levels of success against them, and they haven't went up against anybody that's a world beater, but 115 of 195, 59%. That's 51st in the nation. They've given up 946 yards. This is a great stat. That's only 946 yards through the season. That's really good. That's 9th in the nation, and incredible stat. They 4.9 yards per attempt. That is beyond elite. Look, if you hold somebody below 8, you've done a pretty decent job. 4.9. Duke's passing defense rallies to the ball well, and that includes some of those big plays. So they take away the short stuff. If you want to, and that's what Florida State likes to do, stink and dunk with screens, quick hitches and stuff because they don't trust their pass protection. That'll be interesting to see what FSU comes up with. They've allowed 6 touchdowns, and they have picked off 4 passes so far this year. As far as the last 2 games, these are the ones that matter, not only because they're the last 2, but they're also ACC teams that have some more talent. So I wanted to go into combined stats with them. Georgia Tech and North Carolina, 44-70, 62.9%, 418 yards, almost 6 yards per attempt. That's a little more normal, but it's still low. 5.97, 4 touchdowns and 1 pick. So the last couple games, they've been susceptible to some passing teams that actually had somebody with a pulse at quarterback. If you're not good at quarterback or you have a deficiency, they will find a way to exploit it. Manny Diaz, you may not like him as a head coach, but he can coach defense. No doubt. He was the Penn State coordinator the last few years, did a great job, and ends up back at Duke. I think he's done pretty good so far this year too. So I'm curious to see how Florida State adjusts with that. When we come back, we're going to discuss a little bit about the ability for Florida State to attack certain players, certain levels of the defense, and some of the players that you're going to need to know for the Devils because they got some really good football players on the defensive side of the ball. That's next on Locked On Seminoles. When you're hiring for a small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn just isn't a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't use other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, as an additional and important note, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. So obviously Duke is an attacking defense. They're not going to sit back. They're going to come after you. What does Florida State struggle with? Teams that attack. Not the combination you want. But there is something that I find interesting with this. You're coming off a bye week, and Brock Glenn has already played. So you've got some tape. They do too, but it's not a lot. you can adjust and do whatever you want, and they're going to have to guess more than what you're going to have to guess on them. You've got 6 games of film of Duke's defense. They've got 1 with Brock behind center. It's totally different. Question is still, they're really good on defense, specifically, again, the pass D. They shut down teams for the most part with negative plays. Even if they give up a chunk play here or there in the run game, they get negatives. How can Florida State slow that down? I want you to think about that. And towards the end of this part of the show, I'm going to ask a few questions for the folks listening. You can comment if you're on YouTube. It's something to think about and check it out. So, number 1, the player that I'm most curious about, because Florida State here, and I just don't understand this. Up the middle, Florida State has really, really struggled to be consistent. They'll hit a gap play in the middle, get 5-8 yards on a run, and then they'll get stoned. The first guy coming through is not touching and hammers somebody. They have been so inconsistent in the middle of the line, the guards and center. It's insane. Andre Otto is going to be a guy that may or may not be in the lineup. I don't know the circumstance until I see the game Friday. I have no interest in worrying about that. But what I do have an interest in, and this is just my own personal thing, they've got to come up with an inside running play that negates some of it. They can get at minimum like a couple of yards no matter what. They haven't established that play all year, whether it's inside zone, etc. They're going to have to. And the reason I'm most concerned about this against Duke, his name is Aaron Hall. 6'4", 290, athletic, and very productive. 18 tackles, 5.5 tackles for loss, and 2 sacks. He's a disruptive player. If you don't double him, and again, it depends on the play, but if you don't double him, he's the kind of guy that can be a game wrecker. Also, if you're going to double big Mr. Aaron Hall, they've got a player that might even be better, depending on your perception of football, in Alex Howard playing behind him. 6'2", 230, leads the team in tackles with 47. He's got 9 tackles for loss. He's got 3 sacks. Very versatile player. He'll come off the edge. He'll blitz on a wait. Around the edge, he might come in, drop into coverage just for 1 second, then come. He will find a way to be around the football. Really good. I'm going to study him some more this week. He's impressive from what little film I've watched of him, but I want to watch a whole game to kind of get a better idea of Alex Howard. Also, the guy that I'm not curious about, because I'm pretty sure I know how this is going to go, unfortunately. Unless Florida State is completely healthy at both tackle spots and the right people are starting, I think they're probably going to struggle quite a bit with Vincent Anthony, 6'6", 250. He's a junior defensive end. He's a guy that tries to get upfield. He's probably a little too aggressive at times. He's got, the ability to make plays in the backfield, but he might miss a few run gap pitch. He might be able to burn him once in a while, but 5 tackles for loss, 3.5 sacks. He's only got 11 tackles overall. I'm curious to see if Florida State can exploit him and still not get burned in the process too. He's kind of an all or nothing guy. 6'6", 250, fits the profile for a defensive end. The other guy that's interesting is Joshua Pickett. He's arguably their best corner. Both corners are good, but this kid's 6 foot, 190 pounds, 17 tackles. He's got 5 pass breakups. He's got 3 tackles for loss, so he's aggressive. They come downhill hard in their secondary. Florida State's going to have to find a way to mitigate how they attack the line of scrimmage, including the screen game. Let's be honest. Florida State, I know everybody's tired of it. They screen to death because they don't trust their O-line. They're trying to make that an extension of the run game, whether you like that phrase or not. I'm not a big fan personally, but that's what they've been doing. Duke eats this stuff alive. Again, 4.9 yards per pass. It's pathetic what teams are trying to get against them in some of these plays. Either you hit a shot or you get killed. They've eaten screens and short swing passes alive. They're that team. If Florida State cannot do that, there's going to be a problem. So I'm going to ask a couple of questions here for the fans. And I don't know what the answer to this is. This is open-ended on my part. Number 1, obviously Hakeem has ascended. Ja'Kai Douglas is their number 1. Landon Thomas and Amari Williams obviously playing pretty well, the freshman. So they got some options there. But Jaylen Brown, is he good to go? Is he out of the lineup? Is he in the doghouse? I need to see something that's definitive. And I know I say this every week, but I don't trust Mike Norvell's press conferences on this at all. Is he going to play? They need his speed in the lineup. Malik Benson, unfortunately for him, he made that great catch, and then he got the penalty that came back here recently. But they need some more plays from him. Can he be a part of that short game? Jalen's caught a few of those. Even if they're 5 to 8 yard plays, that's another extension of the run game and keeping teams from just dive into the box. They need some of that so they can set up the deep shots. And Brock certainly likes to throw it deep. He proved that in his first start against Clemson. What about Kentron? He's had some moments. Can he be more consistent? This is his last hurrah, these last handful of games here. I'd be curious to see if he can make a play down the field. Which of the young receivers, or maybe Kentron, do you think is going to step up, if any? Comment on the YouTube page. I think that this is a massive thing. They're halfway through the season, and except for Ja'Kai, which he's the obvious receiver they like to go to, they don't have an outside receiver that's definitively the guy. I assume it's going to be Hakeem Williams for the last half of the season, but I need to see it. I want your take on it. Second question, before we go to the final part of the show, and this is an important one. Does Florida State start changing their personnel packages because of the 2 freshman tight ends? They don't have one that's good. They got 2 that are very, very athletic, very, very unique with their hands. They could both play on either side of the ball. They're just those kinds of players that didn't matter where you put them. They would be effective and impactful. I like both. Landon had 7 catches, I believe, for 80 yards. Amari had the leaping grab for the touchdown in the end zone. Will we see more 1 running back, 2 tight end? Maybe doing something different to help in the run game, more play action, throw it out in the flat. There are some different ways you could utilize this in a similar fashion to the screen game. I like that idea. If you do, go ahead, comment on YouTube again. I'm curious. But if not, if you think there's something else, that's fine too. I'm curious to see what you got to say. Finally, on this, I think they at least got to show it to make some of the teams, after they play Duke, to prepare for it. They're going to have to run more 12 personnel, or 22 even, 2 running backs, 2 tight ends. The receivers haven't been a good unit consistently throughout the 2024 season. You've got to prove that you can become that guy if you want to break into the lineup. I mean, Landon obviously is going to be starting. He's earned it. Now, how do they utilize him? Are they going to move him around? Are they going to put him in the same spot all the time? Which one's the better blocker between him and Amari by the end of the season? There's so many little nuances that I'm curious to follow, because this is what makes following Florida State football fun. They've always had freshmen come in and make an impact, and all of a sudden, you got a redshirt freshman quarterback, you got 2 tight ends, and you got Cam Davis, you got Jalen Brown's redshirt freshman, you got Hakeem, barely played last year. All of a sudden, you got a lot of newness to the offensive side of the ball. The only place that there's not is the offensive line. That's not exactly where you want freshmen and sophomores, but nonetheless, that's a lot of new players to kind of watch. I'm curious to see how that unfolds. When we come back, I'm going to talk a little bit more on the question side of things, like how I would attack. I don't want your take on it. I'm going to ask some questions about how you would attack Duke after the numbers that I've given. That's next on Locked On Seminoles. Have you checked out the Gametime app yet? If not, right now is a great time to do it. There is no better month in the entire year for sports fans than October. College football, pro football are both rocking. Hockey's getting ready to start. October 23rd, NBA starts. Right now, what I'm interested in beyond some of that stuff is MLB. You got Mets at Dodgers. You got Cleveland at the Yankees. If you want to see a game, right now is the time to do it, and the Gametime app is the place to make it happen. Download the app, create an account, and just search for whatever you're looking for. Yankees, Dodgers, whatever it may be. Maybe you want to see the Lakers. You type it in, you click on that team, and you find a game. And then you can even look from your seat when you pick on a seat in a stadium, what the venue looks like from your own phone. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. All right. This is how I would attack Duke, and I'm not saying this is a great plan. The only really great plan is to run your base offense and be able to block the other team. Right now, Florida State is not able to do that. And to that point, this past weekend, Kent State moved ahead of Florida State. They are now the dubious team to be dead last in the FBS in rushing. Florida State is 134 out of 134. Kent State ran for like 65 yards and barely moved ahead of Florida State. When a team moves ahead of you because they ran for 65 yards, you know it's bad. So they got to, that's why I say the very first thing, I got 5 things that are keys. Then I'll ask some questions for you. They got to move the pocket from the first series on. If you think you're going to block Duke when they have as many sacks, got the pass defense they do, the tackles for loss they do, again, they're the number 1 team in the nation for tackles for loss for teams that have played 6 ball games. Number 1. They have 58. Can Florida State throw the football? Well, one of the reasons they will or will not will be how they game plan with moving the pocket and coming up with at least, again, 1 key bread and butter running play. And that's next. What's it going to be? Is it inside zone? Is it a trap? Is it something I talked about from the last part of the show? Landon Thomas and Amari are in. Maybe they use Morlock as a blocker. Whatever it is, West or one of the other guys. They got to come up with something where they're not in 2nd and 10, 2nd and 9, 2nd and 8. That doesn't work with any quarterback, let alone a redshirt freshman that's getting his feet wet. Doesn't work. We've said it all year, and I'm going to continue to say it until I'm blue in the face. They must come up with a bread and butter running play. 4th, more RPO. This is the one that I don't know how they're going to do this. Brock understands it. He's got pretty good comfort with it. But the danger with RPO when you're in Florida State situation, remember, they got 2 scholarship quarterbacks healthy. If Brock goes down, you got a true freshman in the game. Is Luke Krumahawk ready? Krumahawk is probably not. So he's my guy. I think he's going to be really good in the Florida State uniform, but he's a true freshman. They don't want Brock Glenn getting hit anyway. He's quarterback. But he's got to be able to take off more to take some of the burden off the running backs. Deception is a great way to hit big run plays. And like he had the 4th and 9 play against Clemson. Brock's capable. He proved that he's a better athlete than most know, and he's a tough guy because he broke a tackle to get to that 9 yards. He was hit around 6-7 yards past the line of scrimmage and still just barely eked it out for a 9-yard gain and first down for the Noles. Okay, but how many times are you going to risk calling those kind of plays? And I don't know the answer to this. And I'm not saying I'd want to be in this position. But if they don't take the risk of using him with his feet against Duke, it's going to be really hard to move the ball. Yeah, they're dead last in rushing. They're going to come after him. And right now, again, their sacks right now in the nation, they've got 18. That's 15th in the nation. Duke is not messing around. They get after it behind the line of scrimmage. They are a downhill defense on 1st, 2nd, and 3rd down. Florida State's got to come up with something in the RPO game. As an extension, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a trick play somewhere early in the game to get a spark. They need something with that. Finally, we've talked about them multiple times on the show today. They've got to come up with several different ways to get those tight ends the ball. I talked about using 12 personnel, bootlegs, waggles, play action. They got to get them the ball in the flat. I loved how they did it in the last game. They did a nice job. But now there's a little film of them. Clemson didn't expect anything from those guys, and they shouldn't. They hadn't done anything yet this year. Well, Duke's going to have 2 weeks to prepare for that. So it's going to be a little more difficult. You're going to have to change formations. You're going to have to change shifts and change where you're getting in the ball, change the launch point, everything. If Florida State is able to throw the football at least a little bit to the tight ends, it'll take some of the pressure off. Because what I'm thinking of, again, you fake to Cam or you fake to Tofili, whatever it is, you hit the tight end of the flat and you let him go get 4 to 6 yards. 2nd down and 4 is never a bad thing. More, please. You know what I mean? Like that's the easy way to look at it. And those kind of kids, they're not just normal athletes either for big guys. Both of them are capable of making a player miss or trucking somebody and going and getting you a 1st down on a really basic throw. That's what I would do. I'm curious what else Norvell and his staff come up with. Just Duke, they're going to take some risks. You might be able to gouge them with a throw to the flat and get a 25-yarder or something. It's not out of the question. And if Florida State can score early and gain some confidence, they could change that game pretty quick. On Monday, we're going to talk a little bit more about the Duke defense and start to talk about Florida State from a bigger perspective and some of the Florida State defensive information. I'm hoping to get some injury news. I don't really want to talk about their defense yet. I'm curious, with DJ Lundy out, what are they going to talk about? And that's tough. You can't lose leaders like that, but Norvell and his staff, like everybody else, you got to adjust. It's the next player up on the depth chart. I'm going to try to figure out who's going to be the next leader for the Noles. Is it Nicholson? Is it somebody else? That will be Monday's show of Locked On Seminoles. Thank you once again for making Locked On Seminoles your first listen each and every day. Truly appreciate you stopping in to talk some Noles football with me. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe. Truly appreciate it. And now, if you would, because there's a lot going on right now, why don't you check out Locked On ACC for your second listen? The Locked On ACC podcast is really cool. Alex Dono and Kenton Gibbs, they keep it real. They bring you the truth about your favorite teams and everything that's going on in the ACC. So check out Locked On ACC. I will see everybody again on Monday.